Hey everyone, and welcome to Cutting Through the Noise. This is Kyle and Shawn, and this is our Destination Marketing Edition. Shawn, how are you today?
I'm good. Howdy, folks.
For those who are just getting started with Cutting Through the Noise in our Tourism Edition, Shawn is our Digital Marketing Manager, and he manages all of our largest clients. And we thought today would be a cool topic to discuss some of the metrics that we look at when we're first approaching a larger tourism client. Shawn, you want to just give some background onto sort of the conversation one when we start with a big campaign?
Yeah, I mean, we always talk about removing layers of uncertainty and kind of looking at the data and just trying to decide, both kind of the persona, the type of people that sort of we're going after, but also establishing kind of a baseline set of metrics, sort of what are the goals and where are we with the various, things we're going to talk about today. So kind of allows us to assess the health of the sort of digital footprint. We would do the same thing with Facebook. We do the same thing with email marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So it just really allows us to kind of look under the hood, see where we're at. Are we starting, from scratch? Are we starting from second base? And then that allows us to devise the campaign, know who we're going after, and set the benchmarks that we're hoping to achieve.
Awesome. And we've got 5 metrics that we're going to run through today. And, you've kind of filtered these and we've looked at them together and said, these are 5 that for any client, we certainly don't like the cookie cutter approach, but these are 5 that really for any tourism client would be important metrics if you're in a marketing role to get a firm grip of before starting to make those targeting and persona and budget allocation type questions or type solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I think, while these may be sort of terms and metrics you're familiar with because you've seen them in Google Analytics, we take the ones you're familiar with, but then tailor them to the specific client. So that's kind of our approach.
Cool. Well, let's jump right in. So metric number 1, time on site. You want to give a quick background about time on site and why that's an important metric to understand?
Yeah, so you think about sort of time on site or I like to call it dwell time, just in terms of the amount of time that people are on average, spending on your site. It's the same way that you kind of look at the amount of time people are staying in your sort of brick and mortar store.
Right.
Any sort of how long are people sticking around, because that is indicative of quality.
In quality relevance. Content. Are they watching a video on your site? Are they are they digging the images? Are they scrolling through?
And if it's not engaging, if it's not relevant, then the time on site's going to be low. And, there are factors that, you have to consider. And with all these metrics, there's no, people say there's industry averages, there's this and that, but it's sort of the story that the data tells and sort of increases or decreases over periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And, time on site is going to be dependent on the amount of pages that you have on your site, the amount of content.
Right.
Sort of the purpose of your site. In the case of tourism, if people are going to your page just to click a book now button and then get to a form or get directed externally, time on site is going to be low.
You're directing them to Google Flights to book. You're hoping for a low time on site.
Right. But at the same time, if you're a website that's very research focused and very, almost like a travel guide on the web, and if somebody's planning a, worldwide cruise over the course of 3 weeks, you want them to spend a lot of time on
They're
your
looking
site.
for fun things to do.
Right.
They're looking for tickets.
If you kind of drill down and look at the, worldwide cruise section of your website and people are spending 15 seconds on that page, then that's an indication that you're not engaging and you're not giving them relevant content.
Yeah.
And that, can be reflected in sort of our next kind of metric in terms of user behavior, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, it seems like one last comment on time on site. When you do discover one of those pages that has the 5 seconds people show up and then they leave, it's pretty clear when you go to that site, just in our experience, when we discover the URL in analytics, we go to that URL and we say, oh, there's 3,000 words of block text before the image. That could be a simple fix.
Right.
So this isn't a surgery where you're redesigning the website necessarily. It could be just some content blocks moving around.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, there is no hard number that if you're below, 2.5 minutes that you just need to shut it down and move on. It all is
find a new location to target.
Yeah. But you have to think about it. I don't even know if people still bookmark pages, but you have to think about it as, the most important page on your site is one that you would hope that somebody would bookmark and want to return to.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And so kind of to that point, we talk about new versus returning users.
Yeah.
Just in the sense of what that means and why it's important. So what are your kind of thoughts on the percentage of new versus returning users and why we sort of look at that as a key metric?
Yeah, just a quick definition for those out there that are like new versus returning, how exactly is that defined? And it's really as advertised. Returning users are people who have been to your site before, coming back for a second, third, or 10th time. And getting into the weeds a little bit, analytics will actually break down how many people have been to your site 10 times versus 9 versus 8. You can see some of those metrics. And then, of course, new is somebody who's coming to your site for the very first time. And these are key users when we're approaching any new campaign, new users, because these are the ones that are definitely in that awareness phase, specifically for the tourism industry. It's such a long tail conversion. Very rarely, I'm sure people go to your site to booking a flight, but they're in this research phase. And so when we're auditing that new versus returning metric, we just want to get an understanding for is it 50-50? Is it 70% new, 30% returning? We see this in the higher ed vertical sometimes where the amount of new users is 60% and the amount of returning users is 40%, but all of the content on the site is geared toward returning users, current students, current faculty, current staff. So getting a benchmark and understanding what percentage of your users are new versus returning really helps our team, or if you're in a marketing position, it can help inform you of what content should live on that site. You have any thoughts on new versus returning?
Yeah, I think it also can kind of inform sort of your campaigns that are getting traffic to the site.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at it and you see, okay, so of the returning people, 90% have, been here 10 times. Then maybe all of a sudden you're looking at, okay, well, there's this lapsed visitor. Maybe there's this bucket within the returning visitors, the people that are only going once. Like, how can we get them back in terms of retargeting sort of efforts? And, maybe the returning users are more important. And, like you said, the content can tailor that. But I think it also informs where you send people. So if we're just trying to get new people, we obviously want to get them to a page where they're welcomed, where they're informed. You don't want to show your returning visitors when you're driving them to the site through email, through social, hey, welcome.
Right.
Here's what we are.
Right.
So knowing that breakdown does allow you to not only tell your content, but it really sort of helps you figure out your messaging and where you're marketing. And it's a persona. So, we know that our website visitors come here 3 or 4 times a week. How can we make it so they don't need to come 3 or 4 times a week and they convert, or how do we make it that they come 10 times a week?
Yeah, and they're engaged.
Exactly.
Right. One quick tip on returning users: if you haven't filtered out your IP address of your office, you can do that. When we start looking at, wow, there's a lot of users that have been here 2,720 times this year. That's usually people that work for the destination marketing firm. So let's talk about geographic representation, Shawn, and why that made this list.
Well, I think, obviously when you think about tourism, travel, geography is a key piece of it.
Yeah.
This kind of helps you surface content to the right type of people again. If you're seeing that there's a high percentage of people that are visiting your site from the Pacific Northwest, you want to make sure that the only thing you're featuring on the website is not Pacific Northwest.
Right.
And it's like we talk about with higher ed. People in Missoula don't need to be sold on the outdoor activity in the mountains of Missoula, Montana.
Right.
And so you just need to know sort of where people are coming from so that the content is sort of relevant to them. And, if you have a huge, amount of people that are coming from the Northeast, for example,
mm-hmm.
and it's winter, well, the campaigns and language on the site can be tailored to getting out of the cold,
Right.
and whereas if you're sort of just running a bunch of ads about getting out of the cold and your audience is in Florida already, that's just not going to be relevant.
Right. If you're doing this blanket approach, treating the United States as one geo, you're going to lose.
Right.
You want to be able to hyper-target specific geos. And to this point, I think this metric matters because you can figure out exactly where those geos are. You might have an idea, direct flights to your location is always a good indicator. Like these are places we might want to start. Analytics does a great job of uncovering some of those second cities, the ones that maybe aren't as obvious to you. We can fly direct to Dallas from Missoula, and so we should advertise to people in Dallas that they should fly here and vice versa. But maybe there's some cities that you can uncover with geographic representation.
Yeah, and kind of when we think about metrics, in general, there's the identifying them, there's identifying what they mean, but then also sort of putting them into practice.
Yeah.
So, what's an example of a type of campaign you would run for a tourism company that sees they do have a lot of traffic already coming from the Pacific Northwest?
What's a campaign we would run, seeing that they already do? I would definitely think about a retargeting campaign. You kind of mentioned it. Okay, they've got a lot of people coming from the Pacific Northwest, organic traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I might want to retarget them and let them know what city am I advertising for.
It's up to you. Say you're advertising for cruises off Alaska.
Cruises off Alaska,
mm-hmm.
the Pacific Northwest. I would definitely want to advertise the convenience of a flight from the Pacific Northwest. Actually, they wouldn't be flying. They'd probably be taking off right from Seattle, heading north. So yeah, within driving distance, a cruise that hits Alaska. I might want to segment that audience and see, of the people visiting my website from the Pacific Northwest, what specific cruises are they looking at? And then try to target that specific cruise to those specific visitors. You see this in e-commerce. You look at a pair of skis, you see that exact same pair of skis. Instead of just the, K2 is marketing all of their skis to you. They're marketing a specific brand. So I think that's where I might start, is segmenting, making a really custom audience of website visitors and then retargeting them on Facebook, YouTube. Alaska and the tourism industry in general is just so photogenic and scenic, and wherever you're at, I'm sure you have beautiful pictures of your locations. So maybe YouTube would be a good option for that.
Yeah, and I think the way I was thinking about it was, okay, so I see a lot of people coming from the Pacific Northwest, and I'm going to make sure that the organic or the content for organic users is relevant. I want to make
mm-hmm.
sure that it's easy to get to that. But I think I would also take that as here's an opportunity that,
right.
We have, we don't just want to be local. So we have a lot of people, not a lot, but the second highest visited is Florida. So that's number 2. So let's market to them with hey, if you're going to come across the country, great thing about coming to the areas in the Pacific Northwest is you can see everything that's there, but then there's also this option to take a cruise right off the coast up to Alaska. So that's sort of, people outside of a region, and you're trying to get them there. It's an educational.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, in your case, retargeting, it's really getting them to take action.
Take some action, right. The awareness versus the considerations
right.
phases. Yeah, that's a great exercise, and one that folks listening, you should do. Jump on and see what's your top visited city. Maybe your top visited city, like outside of a 500-mile radius.
Yeah.
That could be cool. Okay, top visited pages. This is our 4th metric that we look at and audit whenever we're starting with a tourism client. Top visited pages and top exited pages. Shawn, can you talk a little bit about this metric and why it made the list?
So, when you think about top visited pages, the importance there is, and this is sort of organic, is, the entry point really helps identify sort of personas, what people are looking for. Obviously you can tell that based on what they're searching, but just knowing where people are getting to, you want to make sure that that's optimized and that there's call to actions. And if you're trying to get leads, there's a form on that page. That's just something that, you really want to double down on, making sure it's as crisp as possible,
Mm-hmm.
Assuming if that's the only page that they visit, like let's make it impactful.
Right.
And it also informs where you're sending marketing campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
When you're sending out an email to your subscriber list, if you're just sending them to the homepage and that's not the highest visited page, then that's, probably not, in your best interest.
Yeah.
So, the top visited, considering it's, using the word top and the best, is really helping you optimize and helping you get people to the right spot. Top exited pages really kind of helps inform, it's similar to time on site. If people are all leaving from one page, then there's probably something either wrong with that page just from UX standpoint. Maybe the navigation is bad. Maybe it does have 5,000 words of text. Or it's just the content is just not relevant. And people are expecting to get to a page that lists a bunch of, say you're advertising the top 10 best airlines to fly on if you're going from Florida to the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And you get to that page and it's 5. Or it's not relevant, or it's,
one of the airlines is out of business.
Exactly. That probably points to obviously making, correction and edit. And you can kind of see when we're thinking about these metrics, it's a combination of personas, it's a combination of informing campaigns, but just a straight audit of your website, and because the website is, it's your foundation. So making it as clean and optimized as possible before you start is only going to enhance your campaign.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is go out and launch and spend $10,000 driving traffic to a page with an airline that's out of business when that easily could have been corrected.
I think HubSpot has that stat that says for every $90 in marketing spend, you spend $1 optimizing like the landing pages that you're sending all of this traffic to.
Right.
I think that's great. This is one of my favorite metrics on the list because it's really easy to get to in analytics, which is nice. It's like content, top visited pages. It's very clear. But 2, it is so informative, and it can make such a difference. When you look at time on site, you can see it, but it's a little bit harder to move the needle on time on site because that's sort of an aggregate. Like how much are they spending on all of these pages? Top pages is so specific. This page gets 10,000 visitors a month, and we don't have an email submission on it, or we don't have a call to action button on it. So quick wins, if you're looking for quick wins, this metric is a good place to start.
And also, it's, if you do see a page that's getting, 10,000 visits a day and it's, very specific, say it is, going back to the Pacific Northwest example, maybe it is just a page about cruises. You see it's getting a lot of visits, we'll iterate, and maybe you make another one that's about horseback riding or, traveling to San Francisco or big cities. And so, that type of content is working and people are getting to it, then iterate it for something else that's very specific.
Do more of that. Referral sources is our 5th and final metric of the day. Referral sources, talks about where are people coming from when they get to your site. This can be direct, which means they're typing your URL into the URL bar, URL box, bar.
Go with bar.
Bar. Organic, people who are searching in the Google search bar to serve search results, and there you are as one of the top. And then there's things like Facebook, referral sources. You can do email campaigns, could refer traffic to your site. This one, I think, Shawn, is really key in delivering what referral sources and what efforts are paying off for you. If you're spending a ton of time in posting on social media and you go to your referral source metrics and you find that 2% of total traffic comes from social media, it might be time to sort of scratch your head and think, are these efforts worth it?
Or at the same time, maybe it's, we need to be on social media, but what else can we do?
Right.
Is it maybe let's test an ad campaign and then all of a sudden see if that metric sort of jumps, as a source. I mean, we always talk about, you can't wait for people to come to you. You have to go to where they are. Well, this tells you where your existing users are, so you need to go and find more people like them.
You'll probably discover there's a referral source that you didn't know about, somebody who has a tourism blog or a travel blog that, holy cow, you get 2,000 visitors a month from this one blog post from 2 years ago from a prolific influencer perhaps, and you wouldn't know it unless you knew to look at the referral source.
Yeah, and it's, obviously you're going to look at it, and the first 4 are going to be pretty obvious. It's, after you get through those, I mean, you're not going to influence somebody to type in your URL in the search bar.
Right.
Unless your URL is like go.com. But I think once you scroll down and you see some of the low-hanging fruit, and it's like, wow, we're just getting a lot from these various travel sites. And all of a sudden we're getting linked to by Holiday Inn, and we had no idea that Holiday Inn was linking to us. Like, how can we maximize that?
Yep.
And, this is more of an opportunity one, I think, in terms of, increasing things that maybe aren't as strong, and that you look around and you see, other people are getting tons of traffic from Facebook. Well, then we need to
step up our game on Facebook.
Exactly. And, this is also an important one. In last season when we were talking about traction channels, really focused on the fact that, there's a lot of overlap, and, traction channels, while channels and verticals don't exist on their own, and they do, you do have to kind of change lanes sometimes.
Yeah, things like content marketing and blog writing are very similar.
Right. Well, in here, these overlap in the sense that they need to be analyzed together. Mm-hmm. So you look at referral sources and you can see, okay, well, I got 1,000 people coming from my Facebook page every week. That's great. Well, then let's go look at time on site for those people.
Right.
Are those 1,000 people totaling 1,000 minutes,
Yeah.
Or are those people really
quality?
Right. And how many of the people coming from Facebook are returning visitors, as in engaged people on my Facebook page versus people that are finding me for the first time? So, without completely, overwhelming yourself and it getting all fuzzy looking, you do have to take one of these metrics and then also look at a sub-metric, because all of these alone, they have to be put in context and they have to be validated.
For sure. One thing we didn't talk too much about is segmenting. Also, like for any of these metrics that we mentioned, time on site, new versus returning, geos, top visited, and referrals. In analytics, it's pretty simple to segment that traffic. I want to see ages 18 to 24. Like, what is their time on site? What is their geo representation versus 65 plus? What is their top visited page? And you're going to get very different results. It's important to look at both, as a whole, and then individually, hey, that's sort of the next step. Remove that layer of uncertainty. We want to grow tourism for the younger demographic or the older demographic. Perhaps the Alaskan cruise, we're going to retarget maybe on the older side, or maybe they want to target younger. So that's just a quick note there to make sure to use that segmenting feature in Google Analytics.
Yeah, I think, that's maybe think of another example. So, say you look and it's just, we are just not getting a ton of traffic from Facebook to the page that advertises our packages to Disney World. And that kind of tells you that maybe you don't have the right messaging on Facebook to that demographic. You're looking at 35 to 50-year-old parents who have kids of age that are going to go to Disney World. So maybe you need to tailor your content, your ads to those folks, and then look at the page that you're wondering why people aren't getting there from